Hi, it's Dr. Jen. I wanted to go through some research about GLP-1s and flattened emotions. So let's get into it. Okay. So people taking high dose GLP-1 receptor agonists like semaglutide or tirzepatide, sometimes they're reporting that they feel like emotionally flat, but there's not a lot of research that directly studies this, but there is growing work on mood, reward, and psychiatric effects of these medications. So there's been several systemic reviews and meta-analysis that find small improvements in the depressive symptoms in people with diabetes or obesity using these GLP-1s, but these effects have been generally modest. So I'm thinking that these improvements in depressive symptoms are probably with blood sugar stabilization. Okay. But then some reviews highlight GLP-1 receptor agonists as promising adjuncts in mood disorders, but stress that large focused psychiatric trials are still lacking. So the GLP-1 dose and exposure and emotionality research has been mainly in rodent work. And this is showing acute GLP-1 activation can increase anxiety-like behavior, while chronic exposure reduces depressive like behavior. And this is independent of weight loss. So this is very interesting because we're having people on high dose long term of these GLP-1s. And if they're going to their primary care doctor and like for tirzepatide, if they're just like ramping up the dose to 15 milligrams and no one's checking in on them and talking to them about this could be a problem. And for me, when I dose GLP-1s in patients, I mean, they're chilling at 2 milligrams for a while. And then we're taking breaks and then maybe ramping up. It's personalized. So we're watching that and we're making sure their mood is okay. There has been case reports of some patients having worsening depression and even SI, suicidal thoughts. So that is another thing that we need to look out for. So when we look at the GLP-1 receptors, they are in the reward and emotion circuits of the brain. This is the amygdala, the hippocampus, the VTA, the nucleus accumbens, the prefrontal cortex. And those modulate dopamine and serotonin, stress, the hypopituitary adrenal axis, and neuroinflammation. So they are affecting that. Some think that this is why the food noise is shut down. And patients are still enjoying food, but they're not like obsessed with food. They're not like looking for that like dopamine hit that food gives. But at the same time, we should be sitting around a table enjoying food. God gave us food to enjoy. Like in the Old Testament, like manna every day, like honey and bread. So anyway, it's just very interesting because there aren't a lot of long-term studies on this, especially at these high doses that they are just leaving people on for diabetes to control their blood sugar. So some authors are hypothesizing that reducing that hedonic responses in food reward might in vulnerable people feel like reduced pleasure more broadly. So this is not directly tested as emotional flattening, but there have been colleagues of mine that have had patients that have been overdosed on GLP-1s and they get that just really flattened kind of response to it. So current research does not clearly show that high dose GLP-1 agonist routinely causes emotional flattening, though individual cases of mood worsening do exist and drugs do alter reward and stress symptoms. And on average, these small studies are suggesting antidepressant or neutral effects without important exceptions. So, but anyone feeling numbed or not themselves on a GLP-1 should discuss this dose timing and mental health history with a clinician. And this should be individualized decisions, which we are not having, especially if you're just going to the med spa down the street or going to your primary care doctor that just regurgitates what the drug company reps tell them, and you're on the highest dose because we know conventional medicine. Conventional medicine loves the highest dose for the long time, forever. There is no benefit of pharmaceutical companies getting you off of a drug or medication. Zero. This is why there hasn't been a big emphasis on diet and exercise with GLP-1s. I'm going to leave it down in the show notes, you can check out what I say about GLP-1s and my non-negotiables for being on a GLP-1. But number one, it should be low and slow. You don't need to go high, just like how I am with hormones. You don't need to stay high. You should not be overdosed on this stuff. Overdosing anyone on anything. I mean, you can even have too many chickens on your mini farm. That's my problem right now. They're like going broody. It's a whole thing. I don't know. I'm going to have to build a little timeout place to put the broody chickens in. We have a situation. But back to GLP-1s. Too much can be a thing. And and then we're seeing, like, I don't know, is it just me, or when I see someone that's on way too much GLP-1, they just have this like look of like their soul, like something is going on, like it's almost demonic, like it breaks my heart. It's like this flattened emotion, and that's what the enemy would want, to like have us without emotion, like without joy, and being like super skinny without muscle, like that's just not good. And then you're doing it, like it's almost like you're making yourself sick with this medication, right? We've just It's gone too far. It's too far. So let's talk a little bit more about GLP-1. So GLP-1 acts in stress, emotion, and reward circuits. So across animal work and mechanism reviews, acute central GLP-1 signaling generally looks more stress and anxiety promoting, while more chronic exposure tends to show antidepressant and anxiolytic profiles. So say you're really low in Akkermansia, and Akkermansia is a gut bacteria that helps promote GLP-1. Or say you don't fast at all, you don't even do an overnight fast, you just eat all the time. Well, then your GLP-1 is also going to be suppressed. So this is where this kind of makes sense. So serotonin and limbic targets. So acute GLP-1 or exceedin 4 increases anxiety-like behavior and alters serotonin signaling in the amygdala. Chronic exceedin 4 reduces depression-like behavior without affecting anxiety tests. And then we have these GLP-1 receptors in the amygdala, hippocampus, and dorsal raphe that modulate the release of serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and glutamate, linking GLP-1 to depressives like behavior control. For stress in the hypopituitary axis, central GPL-1 activates CRH neurons in the PVM, increasing ACTH corticosteroid anxiety. So we have this blunting of the HPI and cardiovascular response to acute and chronic stress and reducing anxiety-like behavior. And I've seen this with patients that are on a lot of psychiatric medications and they feel better on the GLP-1. So this is having a mood effect, but do we need high dose all the time peptides for this? No, we can do it naturally. We can take supplements. I'll link my favorite GLP-1 promoting supplements below for y'all. Okay. So very, very interesting. Now, what about neuroinflammation, neuroplasticity, and metabolism? So we do see an anti-inflammatory shift with chronic exposure. This is where the really small daily dosing can be helpful. This is help reducing TNF alpha and interleukin 6, which are high inflammatory cytokines, and suppressing microglial via enhanced autophagy. So this is also, a positive, but you don't have to have the shot for that. You can do this in other ways too. So when we look across preclinical studies, acute GLP-1 signaling rapidly activates stress circuits, HPA axis, and angiogenic behaviors. But chronic receptor activation recruits slower adaptation, and this is reducing neuroinflammation, enhancing hippocampal neurogenesis, broader neuroprotection, and stress axis recalibration associated with antidepressant and anxiolytic outcome. So this is very interesting when we look at GLP-1s. So when we look at this, they have looked at diabetic mice with depression-like behavior, and the GLP-1 receptor agonists extended for reduced behavioral despair while suppressing microglial pyoprops while regulating interleukin 1 beta in the brain and LPS prime microglia. And LPS is an inflammatory molecule that there's a lot of research. So lipopolysaccharides in the gut, and it is influencing brain and depression in the brain. So very interesting. They also showed in these studies that the GLP-1 receptor activation improved mitochondrial function and reduced mitochondrial and intracellular reactive oxygen species and promoted mitophagy, therefore blocking pyrotopic cell death and neuroinflammation. So, really cool stuff going on when you look at GLP-1s, neuroinflammation, and what can happen. We know that neuroinflammation in depression and neurodegeneration is strongly linked to inflammatory cytokines, such as excess TNF alpha, interleukin 1 beta, and interleukin 6, and inflammasome activities. GLP-1 receptor agonists and standard antidepressants both dampen these cytokines, but evidence comes largely from separate literatures and not head to head comparisons. So it will be really exciting when we get more information on how this can support depression, neuroinflammation. But I really do think that we have to be smart about this. We need to be cycling peptides. We need to be doing lowest effective dose and even really smaller doses. We need to look at supporting muscle and make sure we're maintaining muscle because muscle is also going to have a positive effect on depression and brain and neuroinflammation. We really know that blood sugar balance can really help with preventing dementia and other neuroinflammation in the brain. So, some of this mechanism of the GLP-1 agonist is having a stable blood sugar. And we could do that with diet. We can do that with an animal based diet. We could do that with a lower carb. We can incorporate cycle syncing in there. There are so many ways we can do it. And really, what we need to do is just start eating food that is not made with a million chemicals. That would be an easy way to start. So I hope this helps. I would love it if you guys left some questions below. Any questions you have on this topic. What is a good dose? What is cycling? I do have a peptide course that's available. I will link that below. I would love it if this was really interesting to you or you have never even heard of some of these things. I would love for you to share with a friend. It's Dr. Jen signing off. Strong in faith, strong in health.